It is amazing how a mother embraces the child long before she ever holds that child in her arms, man. Listen, I've got 4 children and I've seen my wife do this every time. Okay, long before the child is born, my wife is embracing that child in her womb. I remember one of our children, she, shortly after finding out that she was pregnant, came into where I was one day, sitting down. She sits beside me and she takes out her phone and she starts showing me pictures of our baby. And I'm like, what is that? What am I looking at? Well, it's this website that, through graphic design, has images of what your baby looks like all along the weeks up until birth. And my wife was showing me this image of what my baby looked like at 4 weeks in the womb, okay? Let me tell you something. At 4 weeks, it looked like a blob of something. That's it. There's no circular where you might see a head and it might be a fetal position. There is nothing at 4 weeks. It's kind of a blob. And then, right next to it, this website has a comparison picture for context. They put a certain object there. And at 4 weeks, there was a spoon with a bunch of poppy seeds, and below it a caption said, at 4 weeks, your baby is about the size of a poppy seed. All right? My wife was so excited, and I was so excited, and I was totally faking it. Okay? I was like, man, give me something I can hold in my hands before I get excited, or maybe, if you're kind of, I can see that you are close to delivering this baby, and when you start going into labor, all right, then I start to, all right, get excited, and sure, I got excited before about the idea of it, but nothing like my wife. My wife, that mother, embraced and just completely the baby at the conceptual level long before there was any evidence, tangible evidence of a baby. You know what? This is so important for us to transfer that when it comes to our faith, because the Bible says that faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. All throughout the Bible, we have been people, us not in the Bible, but people of God, to see the birth of something special in their lives from God, had to embrace the promises of God long before they had evidence, any physical evidence. And that's called faith, not saving faith, but promised faith. Okay? For example, Abraham, when he was working in his father's business, and God came to him and spoke to him and said, Abram, get thee out of thee, King James Version, get thee out of thy country and thy kindred and go to a land that I will show thee. I'm going to give you a son, and man, you're going to be the beginning of a great nation. All God gave him was a word that was a little poppy seed. God didn't drop him his baby Isaac in his arms that moment. God didn't all of a sudden transfer all the land in Canaan unto him right then when he spoke to him. But God gave him the seed of an amazing promise in his life. And can I tell you, that is when Abram really received the promise, because he embraced it. And you know what? For you and I, it's the same. At the level of conception, when God drops something in our spirit, when God speaks to us, when we feel that we have something in us from God, that is when we must really embrace and lay hold of it. Recently, God spoke something to me back in December, and I'm thinking, man, that's pretty far out. That seems like that would be a miracle. But you know what? I really have made some strides in the last couple years. And when God spoke to me, I felt, you know what? I need to go all in on embracing this word from God. Let me tell you something. It made a huge difference in my life. When God, I did not wait for, 7 months down the road and, okay, now that this promise is getting kind of obvious, I'm going to embrace this. Or I didn't wait to see the fullness. My baby boy is yelling for me outside the door. I didn't wait to realize and lay hold of that promise before I got excited about it. But instead, when it was first conceived, I told my wife about it, and we began to pray, we began to fast, and every time opposition came, we said, nope, we do not believe it. We're going to embrace this promise within us. But you know, that is so important. Because if you think about mothers, God gives it to a mother to embrace this baby at the conceptual level in order to protect it in the womb and to ensure that it is delivered healthy. That's why, mothers, they stop drinking alcohol, expectant mothers. They hopefully stop doing drugs and hopefully stop trying to play tackle football, and bungee jump and all that stuff. Why is that? Because it is so important to nurture and to protect that promise, to see it delivered healthily. And it's the same for us in our faith. That when God speaks something to us, man, it is time to go all out and say, wait a minute. We've got to double down on embracing this promise and protecting and not letting anything harmful get to it. People will try to talk you out of what God is doing in your life. You know what? Protect that promise. Say, no, I'm not listening. That Satan will use every device in the book to try to abort that thing in your life. And it's the time to become a mother and say, you know what? Nothing is going to stop the health of this thing in my life. Because you know what? It is very possible for the things of God to be aborted in our lives. God, has desired to do many things in people's lives and in our lives, but it's possible for them to be aborted at the conceptual level. If you think about the children of Israel, they get delivered from Egypt. God says, you're going to the promised land. It was not God's will for them to wander around 40 years in the wilderness and die out, many of them. That was not God's will. But because when they spied out the land, the 12 spies, and 10 of them came back and said, it's impossible. God brought us out here to die. That thing conceived in our womb is a farce. This is not of God. Because of that lack of faith, because they didn't protect that promise, that great thing that God wanted to do was aborted. And you know what? It's possible for that to happen in our lives as well. We can let doubt come in. We can start speaking negatively. When although we've got something growing in us, when opposition comes, when negativity comes, if we start speaking negatively, if we start getting ticked off at God, like I've unfortunately done in the past, we can abort the beautiful things that God can do in our lives. So what is God speaking to you? That you don't have any evidence of it coming to pass right now. You can't lay your hands on it. There's not a plan that you have that you can conceivably work to hold this. All you have to go on is God spoke to me. God planted this in me. Do you have a word from God like that? Let me tell you something today. Embrace that. Bible says down a few verses later that the men and women of faith, in Hebrews chapter 11:13, I believe it is, they saw these promises afar off and they embraced them and were persuaded of them. And that's what a mother does. And that's what you and I should do with the promises. When we get a word from God, no matter the naysayers, no matter the obstacles, we need to embrace that promise. We need to be persuaded of it. Because you know what? That is when a breakthrough begins. When does life begin? Great debate. Life begins whenever the doctor swats the baby and he or she cries out. And I've been there for all 4 of my babies to see them take their first breath. What a miracle. Some say that's when life begins. When you tell me, I'll tell you when my wife would say life begins, is when she first feels that stirring inside of her. Let me tell you, that's when your breakthrough begins too. It's when you feel that stirring. So if you embrace that at that moment, God is going to lead you and guide you and strengthen you to see the birthing and for you to eventually lay hold on something amazing for Him. But only, once again, if you embrace it at its conceptual, at the seed, at the poppy seed level. Hey, if you like this video, go ahead and subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you're watching this on my website, go ahead and subscribe to my email list. Just drop me your email address, and that way you will not miss out on future encouraging content. In the meantime, be encouraged, my friend.